Good morning. This is Bill from Auto Europa Naples on it's a pretty lovely Florida Tuesday, I have to say. The weather's just about right. Just took the light jacket off, just hitting the 60s. Very, very pleasant. Unfortunately, the Weather Channel is pointing out that we have like 7 days of miserable, hot, unnatural weather coming up over the next week, which is pretty damn unacceptable. As you know, it's nice when you live in Florida in July when it's not fit for human existence, that you get a little reprieve from that in the wintertime, even, God forbid, some very chilly mornings. Well, this winter, again, we've been robbed. I may have to send some kind of a letter of apology to that little whatever the hell her name is, Greta Thunberg or something, because it's just too damn hot for January, and I can't stand it. But anyway, I'm going to enjoy today, and that's pretty much all I can do. I do have today this 1991 Mazda MX-5 Miata. I've made no secret of the fact that I love Miatas. I've reviewed a few of them before. We race Miatas. We've got an Auto Europa Spec Miata that we run in the SCCA stuff around the tracks in Florida. And I have gone from one of these guys who, initially when these cars came out, I ridiculed them. I made fun of them. I mean, I thought they were ridiculous. When one showed up, I thought, oh, who's the hairdresser? Who's the flight attendant? But I was wrong, and in fact, I've learned that over the years, and I'm happy that I did. A lot of reading on the subject is great, but when you actually drive a Miata, when you get into one, when you operate it, there's just nothing else in the world like it. It's almost automotive perfection. It's come as close to that as any car that I can imagine. In terms of reaching its mission, in terms of being what it was designed to be. You can thank a guy named Bob Hall for it. He was an American guy, but fascinated with Japanese culture. There's our detailer driving that purple 924, which hopefully we get that going soon. There's just something about him in a Porsche that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Anyway, Bob Hall, you can thank him. He pushed for this car like nobody else. This, little American guy, infatuated with Japanese culture, infatuated with cars. His dad had a big thing for, of course, the early British roadsters. And as this guy made his way up, he started writing for Motor Trend. He eventually went over to Japan, spent some time there, got hired by Mazda as part of their, design team, whatever you want to call it. And he pushed hard for Mazda to build a modern incarnation of the original British sports car, and he did, and they did. They didn't believe it at first in the whole concept. It took them a while to come around to it, but a lot of persistence really paid off. If you look at it, the first, you can talk about the VW Beetle, the Concept 1, as being the new Beetle, if you will, in the mid-90s. That sparked the retro craze. But here, back in '89, the Miata really did share quite a lot in terms of appearances with a Lotus Elan, one of the most attractive little sports cars of all time, from the curves to the door handles, even down to the sort of modern incarnation of the famous Mini-Lite British racing wheel. And it did look pretty retro. Also, this was at a time when everything looked like a doorstop. Everything was sort of, wedged and angled and creased, almost like a modern Cadillac, except less exotic. And along comes this little lovely roadster with curves and bulges and just a very, very pretty, pure design. And people went nuts for them. Here in 1991, this is even the second model year of this car, there was still a waiting list for this. People were still paying a premium to get their hands on one, and that's because there's Eric the paint guy coming in. Gonna have some bumpers to do. Anyway, people were paying a premium for these things, and we've got airplanes right over it. We've got looks like a mosquito control Hughes helicopter directly overhead, and almost a island hopper paint scheme. Anyway, people were paying a premium for these things because they were incredible. They were absolutely incredible. The purity of this car, from its concept, what the hell was it called? The Jinbei Ite. It's a oneness with a horse, which frankly sounds a little bit sketchy, at least in terms of some of the stuff that the Japanese are putting on YouTube or Pornhub. But anyway, it is oneness with horse and rider, and it was a lovely concept, and it permeated every part of the development of this vehicle, and it really did pay off. Originally, there were 3 concepts for the Miata. There was a mid-engined rear drive layout, a front-engine front drive layout, and then Bob Hall pushing for this front midships, meaning the engine pushed behind the front wheels, rear drive layout, very much like the original British sports cars. And it won the day, thank God. Near 50-50, perfect weight distribution. They lightened everything, aluminum hood, all sorts of different, battery in the trunk, and they used kind of a motorcycle-style battery. They saved some weight there. They used a stainless exhaust manifold to save some weight. Definitely, the whole push for this thing was to keep it light and nimble, and they kept it stiff and rigid. So from the middle front engine 1.6 liter 4 to the rear differential through the transmission is all connected by what Mazda called a power plant frame. It's basically like a torque tube type thing. Porsche uses them to keep the cars rigid, and that means that you've got a perfect, proper connection from the engine all the way to the differential, does away with the need for a transmission mount right under the driver, and keeps the car stiff and lovely. Also used a double wishbone suspension. One could argue it could have worn bigger wheels. These little 14s don't grip incredibly well, but of course that's part of the joy of the car, is that it's so easy to throw around and put into a slide, recover. Even a nitwit, even a terrible driver like me, can be a little bit of a hero driving a Miata around a racetrack. The pedals are perfection. Even the sound, the exhaust note. Rob Hall drove around in a car with audio tapes of his favorite exhaust notes until he could sort of zero in on the one that would give him the most pleasure, and that was engineered into the exhaust note of the Miata. So in terms of rewarding the driver with purity and loveliness, virtually no stone was left unturned. Anyway, I could run around this whole thing, but let's just get into it. So here in the trunk, I'm going to insert a key and get that open. There you can see the original hilarious little donut tire. I mean, that thing is just tiny, and nice original cover on there. The battery is behind this guy, and the NB, the later Miatas, that got buried down a little bit lower, but up here it's still up high. But it's a pretty decent, useful sized trunk. Not more than you need, not less than you need. Nice little cheapy carpety liner, and all just perfect, and not much different from an MGB, except the key lock is going to keep working and the trunk will keep opening. Also, it probably won't rust away, so absolutely lovely stuff here in the trunk. Let's have a look under the hood. The sun's coming out, and that's going to screw us up a little bit in terms of the camera, but the hell with it. It's been a long morning. All right, so that is an aluminum hood that was put on there to save weight, and did so very, very well. They also robbed this engine from the 323, a front drive car, and turned it into a north-south thing instead with a lovely little shifter. But anyway, transmission, I should say. Very, very nice. About 120 horse, maybe a little less, 116. Decent torque figure. A lot of people cried for more power, but the power that this car has is adequate for what it is, and really challenges the driver, particularly on a racetrack. This is not about straight line speed. This is about keeping momentum going. You can see it's a twin overhead cam, much like the MGB engines of old. Very nice stuff. 16 valve, breathes very well. This is the, kind of the perfect modern version of that British Roadster engine that, again, wasn't extremely powerful, but had a lovely rev band and was a joy to tool around. You can see this generation, the NA had these gorgeous pop-up headlights. I'll put those up in a minute. On this 49,000 mile immaculate, you know, car. Everything is really nice under here, and that's very nice to see. Very collectible quality. Anyway, let's get that back down. It's hilarious just how light the hood is. On these first couple of years, you see it had Mazda decals instead of that little strange diamond-looking thing, and I think that looks good. Also like to see the clarity of those parking lights. Alright, pop-up headlights are a thing of the past. You got them in Corvettes as well for a while, but in 1998 it was over for Miata. Partially, I think in fact mostly because of the danger they said to pedestrians. I guess these things popped up would disembowel them if they got hit, but I think that's a small price to pay for the beauty and attractiveness of pop-up headlights, much like you would have had on the Lotus Elan. Also, it did have a bit of a Lotus Elan happy-looking oval air intake down there. And again, that is just so absolutely iconic, the front end of that car with the headlights popped up. They also were bad for aerodynamics, but goddamn, that's pretty. You do have to love those little mini light alloys, the 14s. They're designed to look like the sort of upgraded British racing alloy they used on the early British Roadsters. Nice chunky mirrors. Very, very nice stuff. It also had door handles almost directly off a Lotus Elan. Very cool little chrome things where you put your finger in and pull like that. Lovely stuff. The interior, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to run this car forward a little bit so the sun isn't so much in our way. I'll do that right now. If I can get the key in. I can probably just put it in neutral and coast forward. Nah, it's too light. Hilarious. So we'll go next to that Corvette. These things are natural enemies on the racetrack. Alright, so let me hop out again so you can see some stuff. The interior is perfection, pure simplicity. Part of the design was that it should be able to fit two decently tall guys. It should have nice supportive seats that kept you planted, and it should be very, very simple. You know, quality materials, if not you know, the most expensive materials, but certainly a good quality and should stay together well. And it accomplished all of that. You've just got nice vinyl covering the doors, very simple, everything light, little plastic pull guys there, window cranks. You could get power windows if you got into like the package C car. There was package A, B, and C. But for nimbleness and purity, I have to say that I think the manual windows are the way to go. It's got a lovely leather-wrapped steering wheel, very nice to grip, of course heavily tested to make sure that it had a nice feeling. Also, the American models got an airbag in 1990, which is, you know, again, nice useful thing to have in a car. It might even keep you safe, you never know. Just hop in and have a look. Beautiful, simply laid out instrument cluster. You see you've got your fuel gauge, your tach, your oil pressure, your water temp, and a very ambitious 140 mile an hour speedo. Although drafting at Daytona in the 03, the spec car, we can just about hit 140 bump drafting with 2 or 3 guys on the straight, so it works out pretty well. But I don't think this thing's going to hit 140 on its own. You got little proper stalks for your wipers and your headlights. You got cute little horn buttons there on the steering wheel. This one had air conditioning, thank God. You know, back in 1991, that was an option. Didn't have to have it, but I'm glad this one did. You've got a nice Logic, full Logic control, AM/FM cassette deck. Lovely stuff. Beautiful little short throw shifter. I mean, you know, perfection. Just lovely to bang your way through the gears with that. Very simple glove box, nice set of books in there. It does have the weirdest sun visors ever. This weird horizontal, I mean, what the hell is going on? I don't know who designed these. You know, you really do have to love the Japanese. You really do. This car's built in Hiroshima, by the way. Kind of interesting. But this is something that only the Japanese could come up with, kind of like, you know, those girls in the schoolgirl uniforms and Harry Carey and, you know, Bukkake and whatever it is they're doing over there. I don't mind having, you know, cars built by a culture that might encourage suicide if the cars aren't built very well. But you do end up with weird things like these sun visors. Very simple rear view mirror, not more than you need, not less. You've got these sort of very, I won't call them chintzy, but they're sketchy cup holders, which may or may not work well to contain your drinks at high speeds or high corners. In here you've got a great little center console, good place to put you know, your little 9mm of some variety. It's going to have to be a micro one, but that'll kind of match the car. And of course a fuel release, all very lovely stuff. All right, let's see what we got here. I'm going to pop this cover off so you can see the way the top works. So it does have the original top cover, which is quite nice. Often these things get discarded or lost. You just pop it off there. A very nice sort of modern incarnation of the British MGB tile top cover. Oh God. All right, let's get that off. Now to properly use this top, and I'll show you this in a minute. Let's get this thing up. You see I've unzipped the back window to lower the top. A lot of people might not do that. That's a bad idea to not, because it does give you things like wear inside the window when it folds in an awkward way. So correctly, one should be unzippering that before lowering the top. Also, actually, it's a quite nice way to drive. If you put that back window down, you put the side windows down and drive around, you get sort of a convertible feeling, but with a sunshade or rain cover, and that works out quite well. To latch it, you work these sort of big, clunky looking latches here, push at the back for safety, pull it out, down it comes, get those weird sun visors out of the way, and there you are, good to go. It works awfully well, but I'm going to put that back down because that is the best way to drive a Miata, in my opinion, with the top lowered. Just like so. I'm not going to bother putting that top cover back on because it takes a little while and it's easier as a two-man job, so we'll just stuff that down there for the moment. With a fixed antenna, that became power later, but of course the fixed one was lighter. Nice little pipe at the back. And again, the exhaust note that comes out of these is just lovely. All right, let's go for a spin. So key in, get our sun visors back up. You get a irritating little Japanese warning buzzer. And fire this thing to life. All right, great little sound. You know, again, everything in this car was, every design team, every person involved was under strict orders to make this thing part of that oneness with horse and rider. That was their mission, and it just meant if you had to break the rules, you did. At the time, Mazda used a 45mm throttle pedal treble. That was the max. That was it. You could have 45mm. In this car, they made it 65mm because it felt better. And again, that was the kind of dedication that they put into this thing, and man, did it pay off. God, they sold, they've made over 1 million of these things. They made 400,000 of these NAs alone through 1998. The pedals, perfect spacing. Again, even a complete goon like me has no problem heel and toeing. Nope, beeping. Let's go. So it made it on everyone's favorite list. It was Car and Driver, Car of the Year in 1990, Automobile Magazine, Car of the Year. It was on Car and Driver's 10 Best list 17 times. Every automotive guy went nuts for it. And I can tell you, if you're one of these people who thinks this car is for hairdressers, you have absolutely no idea. Well, you do. Okay, it is for hairdressers. But if you are in any way a car enthusiast who loves to drive, get one of these with a stick. Don't get an auto. That's sacrilege. And take it on a windy road somewhere, preferably with elevation up in the mountains, and you will be in nirvana. Listen to that exhaust note. If it were just a little louder. The way it free revs, it's just lovely. The steering response, perfection. Oh my God. You know, wind in the hair. This is what automotive fun is all about. You know, it's great to have big V8s and 12,000 horsepower, but you have to be breaking the law to have any fun with them. In this car, you can have a blast at 40 miles an hour. Brake feel, you know, again, it gets old just saying it, but brake feel is perfection. Steering feel is perfection. You know, the way the car rides around almost on the bump stops like a go-kart, perfection. Look at that, I barely hit 60 and I'm having a great time and I feel like I'm driving like a criminal. The cop might not even notice this thing. So anyway, there it is. I have to say, the NA Miata, truly one of the great markers in automotive history. It changed so much. It brought back the Roadster, which had essentially been abandoned. I mean, when this came out, basically the only other option like it was an Alfa Romeo, and that thing was a piece of crap. So it just brought about a pureness of the automobile that was sorely lacking. It found a perfect hole in the market to exploit, and people responded accordingly. They went nuts for it. And that's why these early cars in shape like this are becoming very collectible. If they didn't make so many of them, they'd be worth triple digits. I mean, they're just that important and that good and that high quality. So anyway, there it is. This is a 1991 Mazda MX-5 Miata. Miata, by the way, is an old German word for reward. So I guess this is your reward for leading a life of, you know, goodness. But anyway, 91 MX-5 Miata. This has 49,000 miles, white, black. This is a real sweetheart. Super collectible car in this condition. And still an absolute pleasure to drive around. Just a joy. It's for sale in our lot. You can see it at aenaples.com or give Marty a call, 239-298-8000. Thank you so much for having a look. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you with something soon. Take care.